Welcome, Gretchen. So happy to have you on here. I love
Thank
having other entrepreneurs and leaders in the world and other podcasters.
thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's just start right away with how did you get to the place you are now? Like, what were your roots? How are you kind of inspired to go down this path?
Mm. So it's not been like a normal journey, I would say. The only thing that's been like consistent in my journey is the love of learning. I'm always creating. I'm always learning. So today I'm the chief learning officer for a company called Threefold. And in my role there, I'm responsible for readying our talent for growth and managing our talent operating system. And that allows me to work with leaders and help them grow. And I just have always loved getting to know people, getting to know their stories, and then seeing the best in them and helping bring that out like consistently. I love to teach, and I grew up in Colorado. I went to college and I was very blessed because it was just like assumed I would go. Like there was no question. Like, of course I'm just gonna go. And then when I got there, but I had no idea. Like I rediscovered like who I was when I went to college. And I got my bachelor's degree in communication. And then when I graduated, I was like, I still don't know what I'm gonna do. Like this, I like learning, I like school. So I thought, well, I guess I'll go to more school. So I went to grad school and studied communication. And my first jobs were like, I thought, well, how can I take communication and like make money at this? I really wanted to be an actress, but I didn't study that. And then people told me I wasn't really very good at it. And so I just thought, well, how can I take what my love for communicating and make that into a job? And so training just really kind of made sense. And so I had like envisioned myself becoming this amazing trainer and this amazing keynote speaker and all those types of things. So all my jobs were in some way teaching other people how to do something, whether it be onboarding them or training them on company policies and things like that. And so throughout my career, I was doing learning and training and all that. I mean, it's kind of like boring. I mean, I could go into like all the different places
Well,
that I
I'm
work.
curious, can you tell most of us out here who don't know what is a chief learning officer? Like, it sounds like a cool title, but what does that mean exactly?
Anytime we put the word chief in front of something, it's like, ooh, that's so special. Um, my, chief learning officer primarily focuses in the aspects of learning and development. Sometimes folks might be chief learning officers and also have some kind of element of like technology. I have kind of both of those things. So in my role, I am responsible for everything related to attraction, retention, engagement of our employees, which also includes me facilitating workshops, or it means that I am managing our online portal, creating our online portal, creating courses. It might mean that I'm coaching. It might mean I'm sitting in executive team meetings and coaching those executives or developing strategy with them with regards to their talent development needs. So it can be a lot of things. I think the difference between like a chief human resources officer versus like a chief learning officer, human resources officers generally are focused in like that good compliance and regulatory, all those things you need to make sure your business is operating in the highest and best ways. And then the learning officers generally are focused on specifically on those people and developing those people and moving them through leadership and growing your organization and attraction.
Mm. So, are you giving workshops or individual kind of sessions on leadership, how to best lead, communicate, um, also interact with others? Is that part of the chief learning officer's job?
Yes, all of that. All of that. So I'm one of the exciting projects that I'm working on right now is I've kind of developed a pathway for leaders who come in from individual contributors all the way up to business owners. And how do we move those people um, that want to grow and want to be in our our portfolio of companies for a very 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 long time? Like how do we move them through that? Which is like I spent like the last 2 years kind of developing out this pathway and then coming into this new year, I'm looking at pathways that are focused specifically on those individuals that um, don't necessarily want to go into the path of management, but do want to become experts because I believe that leadership does not equal management. I believe everyone is a leader. Um,
Oh, I
I
love
also
that.
believe that,
Yeah,
yeah,
because I think
leadership
that's
is
probably, as a leader, managing is usually like you kind of get that clenched feeling, you know?
yeah, yeah. There's some people that just don't enjoy it's like they believe that the only way they can get it up is if I manage people, but they don't love all that responsibility or even talking with people, and dealing with the personnel stuff that comes some people love that, they thrive, they wanna be there for their team, they love supporting them, and there are other people that just aren't wired that way, but they think that that's the only option. And so, with the work that I'm doing now, so there's a path, like a leadership pathway, but then there is also a expert pathway, right? And so you have like those transition points of determining like, gosh, I'm good at what I want to do, and I could either go manage people or I could double down and become more of an expert in what I'm doing. And so then what does that growth look like? And so that's kind of the work that I'm also focusing on going into next year is like, how do we develop those paths for individuals that want to grow but don't want to manage people? They don't want to have that authority relationship. They want to use their influence. So it's like really exciting. I love that kind of stuff. And all of that is for people who are interested in growing though. Like none of that is um none of that is prescriptive for someone that doesn't have any desire to grow or become a better version of themselves, right? Because
Mhm.
I think that there are some individuals who just like want opportunity, but they're not demonstrating that they are willing to do anything for that. And I think there's some value in providing a path, but I always tell employees that I'm working with, like, you need to have a point of view. Like, you have to have a point of view. Like, what do you want to do? Right? It's not up to me to tell you, like, you should be the next manager, right? It's you have to just say that I would love to manage people, and then let's talk about how you need to grow there, right? Or you have to say, I don't want to manage people, but I still want to grow and I still want to earn more money or I still want to have more status or I still want to have whatever that might be. So,
So what would you say, just, from your experience, what are some of the best traits to either capitalize or improve upon that leaders really need?
well, I think ultimately, I think you have to know yourself before you can know anybody else. So, if you haven't done the deep work on yourself to really know who you are and to trust yourself, right? To know who you are and to trust who you are, um, you managing other people or leading other people is just going to be a mask, right? Because you're going to constantly be fighting against something that you don't know about yourself. You're going to have gaps or you're going to have blind spots and things are going to trigger you to behave in ways that you don't realize are not helpful and don't allow people to feel connected and don't allow people to belong because you don't know yourself. So that's, I think, the most important thing is do the hard work on yourself. Know yourself, like yourself, trust yourself.
Hmm.
And then if you do all that, then I think, really paying attention to your intention and for what purpose, like, how are you serving others, right? Are you interested in building, loyalty and satisfaction with your people? Are you wanting people just to be loyal to you, right? Like, just be allegiant, just obey what I'm saying, right? And you don't really care if they're satisfied? It's not gonna really get you anywhere. Or do you only care if they're satisfied and you don't really know anything about them, right? Because if you're just focusing on people that you're managing, like I want them to be satisfied, but I don't really have any tie to them, I don't have any connection to them, then your employees are going to be grateful for that until they find the next best thing and they're going to go look for that. They're going to become opportunistic, right? But if you also are only focused on them being loyal to you and relying solely on personal relationship and you don't actually take into consideration how that relationship is helping them be their best self, then at some point those scales are going to tip and that obedience and that allegiance that they have to you will turn against you and it'll become in a very kind of toxic type of relationship. So I think working on yourself and then paying attention to how you can help others become their best self, those are the two things I think are most
And
important.
how much did you think, like, in that understanding of yourself, like, taking these tests, like, say, a Myers-Briggs or something, these tests that really do sometimes show us how we're almost pre-wired and, like, what our tendencies are? How helpful do you think those kind of tests are to give us a better, kind of landscape from which to operate from, you know?
I think I love I'm like a survey like test junkie. Like I love to take assessments because I like to have data and I like to have data about myself. And so I think that any of those types of assessments, whether it be Myers-Briggs or DISC or StrengthsFinder, like all of them have some purpose and something that they are measuring. I don't think that there's one like be all end all, like this is everyone should just do this. I think that you take all these different assessments and it's just, again, it's more data to know yourself. And I also think there are different stages in our life too, where we need to have a different perspective and insight on ourselves. Right. And so I think that they're valuable, but I would also say that with all of that, at the end of the day, again, you have to have a point of view. So you can take in that data. It's good to either affirm what we already know about ourselves or kind of shine a light on blind spots and gaps that we didn't see in ourselves. And when we have that kind of light shined on something that's a little disruptive for us, it's like, oh, I don't think I agree with that, or I don't see that in myself. That's a moment of pause. It's like, okay, well, do I want do I want to dig into this? Do I want to know more about this, right? And if I do, then start asking trusted friends and advisors, pay attention to that because I really believe that we attract what we focus on. And so if you get feedback that you're like, I don't really feel like that's me, then start paying attention to it and seeing if that does show up. If it doesn't, it's up to you to be like, okay, yeah, no, that was just like, I don't agree with that. I don't own that. But it's also on you to decide, like, do you want to fix that either? So
Mm. So for somebody who has a because I'm in the wellness space, let's just
mhm,
say who has a wellness brand that they have created, and they want to work with you because you work with both individuals and companies, correct?
mhm.
What are some of the first questions you ask someone who is wanting to grow their brand
Mm. And grow their brand specifically with Threefold or just in general?
in general?
Um, I think for me, when I am in conversation with folks about their business, I want to understand kind of like what is their why. I want to understand um like why do they do it. I've had a number of people like try and talk to me and sell me on things, and they're like specifically even like with wellness, it's like I'm looking at you and you're not healthy, right? So, you
Yes, right.
know, um
Are you reflecting what you're
yeah.
ultimately selling? Yes.
Yes, yes, like, don't talk to me about an exercise program, and I can tell that, like, you are not actually exercising and taking care of yourself, right? Or don't talk to me about healthy, mental health and taking time when you just came in here as a blustery mess and you're, like, so stressed, and we spent the first 10 minutes you telling me about how busy you are, right? So, so I'm always looking for authenticity, and I'm always looking for, transparency, but, more importantly, I care about, people, and I care about loving people really well. And so when I'm speaking with someone, I wanna understand how are they demonstrating love for themselves and love for others? And that might be a little bit unique compared to other people, but, if I don't believe that you will love my employees and the people that I connect with as well as I would, then I'm probably not gonna engage in that conversation with you, right? Or if I don't feel like you're being loving even to me in the way that we're dialoguing, that's gonna cause me to kind of pause. So,
Mm. I
and I
love
think that
that
with
it
them,
yeah,
go
go
ahead. No,
ahead.
you asked me something.
Well, I was gonna say, this is almost a little counterintuitive to some of these, like, higher executives who it seems in the past need to portray this, I mean, it's not exactly like a monarchy of sorts, but just they need to kind of portray this image and this persona of being not someone to fear, but fear and respect seem to sometimes get mistakenly connected.
Yeah.
And what I think you're saying is a leader who really is showing that they love what they do, they love what their mission is, but they're also loving toward other people is going to be the most successful.
Yes. And I believe that I want you to be pulled together and I want you to be clear and but we can over index on that, right? And have it so tightened up and we've got our pitch and we've got our slides and we've got our our slicks or all the things that we're going to show. Um but that is also just kind of like shallow. as well. Like, yeah, that stuff, like, kind of, you should have that, but I'm not going to get worked up if somebody, um, you know, messes up in their presentation, right? Or, um, I don't know, in in the spirit of like showing up as their best self. Like, I'd rather have you be real, and like call it out, like, oh shoot, like I see I have a spelling error on my slide, sorry about that, right? Like,
Right.
I'm if every slide has a spelling error on it, then I'm going to be like, maybe you don't have the care that I need, right? But like one spelling error, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're dead to me, I can't work with you, type thing, right? So I don't know, I think that, there's I also don't love any kind of, presentation where you come in kind of like it from a defensive space. Like, sometimes when I have worked with individuals and I've talked with lots of different vendors that are kind of in like this wellness space, I think wellness is also another one of those kind of very gray, like what falls into that, right? But I've talked with some folks that come in kind of like with a chip on their shoulder of like, I'm going to prove to you how important wellness is, and it's, you already have a seat in front of me, so clearly I feel like it's important. I don't need you to bring in all that baggage that made it hard for you to get into a room like this. Like, I'm inviting you in this room. So I don't need you to show up in that way. I just need you to share with me, like, what are you going to bring? What's your voice in this story? And how is that going to make me or my employees healthier, better, and all those things? 'Cause I wouldn't have you in the room if I didn't care about it. Right.
Exactly. So in terms of learning and personal development, obviously, I think this is like a lifelong journey.
Mhm.
But what are some recommendations you give people in any space that they might be in, whether it's wellness or something else, in terms of like always keeping this fresh and at the forefront?
Well, I think, when I think about even just like my own journey in learning, um, I've had to, really kind of reinvent different ways in which I have learned and I have grown. And so that's something I would share with folks is, if you're not a person that like loves to read, like reading isn't the only way that you can learn. And so really just be open to what are the best ways in which you can get joy from learning something that you don't know how to do, or investigating something that you're curious about, right? So, that might be, instead of reading a book, maybe you're good at listening, right? So try the audiobook, right? If you don't like reading at all, there is so much content in the world today. Go on Google and look up the author and see if you can watch a talk that they did on that topic or that book. Maybe it's just asking someone in that same field to go shadow them for a day, or just, ask them about their job. Or maybe it's volunteering at some event, where you go and immerse yourself kind of in the experience. There's so many different ways in which we can learn. And I think that folks get stuck in like a fixed mindset because they think about, well, I don't have the opportunity, I can't take the time off, I can't. And there certainly is, certainly barriers, but I really believe that if you desire to grow, if you desire to be the better part of yourself, it is an ongoing journey. There isn't like we ever like, okay, now I've learned it all. Like, I'm
No.
done.
Yes.
Right? There's
The
like,
more you know, the more you know you don't know. Yes,
exactly,
exactly.
and I believe that, like, when I am learning something, then I start thinking, like, "Well, how am I gonna apply this into, like, my family, right? And how do I take these lessons into my home?" Or I might look at something that I do in my business, and I think about, "Okay, well, how can this relate to making my family better," right? And so I go from, like, learning and applying it in my home to learning it in my business, and then through my business, I think about, "Oh, what kind of influence does this have," right? "How can I impact my community," right? And so then when I start, participating in my community, well, then I learn a whole bunch of things that I didn't even know that I was ignorant to, right? And I go all the way back into this cycle of learning again, right? So I just see it as like this ongoing infinity loop of, learning and applying and influence and impact, and then learning again, right?
I like that you said applying, because on the other end are people who just get one certification after another,
Mm.
after, like and it's almost, some of that is good. And then it becomes almost like there's just the pursuit to acquire it, but you're not applying it. Or you
Right.
might do something and then you're like, wait, there's another course out there that has like a different point of view. And, there's those people who just kind of collect all the certifications. I see this a lot in the wellness community,
Mhm.
but they don't really have a stance. I mean, not that you like you said, you don't want a rigid mindset, but if you're not applying that knowledge and then seeing, like, the results of that, like you said, in the community, in your own personal development, in your relationships, you're not giving yourself a chance to let that knowledge land and be integrated. I don't know if you see a lot of that as well.
Oh, absolutely, because I think that we are in a culture of consumption right now.
Yes, that's it. It is.
And
It's like, what
and
is this like? It's almost like a, uh, yeah. It's not just a pursuit. It's a compulsion. Yeah.
Well, and the challenge with consumption also requires you to continue to be, like, separate
Mm.
and more and, like, this concept of, like, I need more, like, there's not enough. I think it breeds, like, this concept of, like, you're not enough and you need to continue to get more, you need to continue to get more
Yes,
versus
it's like a lack of confidence that you just need
yes.
to keep on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's I gotta get that one more cert, right? Oh, she got a cert, so
Mhm.
now I gotta get a cert and I gotta get a license, right? Or, um, whereas I believe I would much rather come from and I think that that's also based on, like, a scarcity, right? Like, that's I'm gonna miss out. It's the whole FOMO, it's all those
Oh,
things
yeah.
that miss out. Versus thinking about abundance and how do I take what I know and how do I share that and how is that serving others? And so by serving others, I'm actually connecting, right? So I'm not consuming, but I'm connecting. I'm connecting ideas. I'm connecting people. I'm connecting stories that all come together. And um, I had a very good friend of mine I was talking to the other day about this idea of stories and this idea of sharing, and that there are some of us that are tapped to tell the same stories, but we have to tell it from our voice. Because my voice, someone hearing me right now, is going to make a lot more sense than maybe your voice, Laura, right? Or somebody else's voice and saying that. And it's not like these aren't super always unique ideas. It's just, it's the same concept that it's a message that needs to be shared, but we need other voices sharing that so that it resonates with other people. So,
I really like that a lot, that idea of, like, sharing in community and connecting versus always just consuming, because I think you really nailed it on the head. Like, we are in such a consumptive mode, and everything is set up to be that way. And I
mhm,
see this a lot in the wellness world. Somebody will, again, get this certification, try it out, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, but somebody says something different, and maybe I should go over there. And it,
yeah,
like you said, it's breeding this lack of confidence and FOMO and insecurity. And it doesn't mean that you can have a point of view and change it or amplify it, or, you know, again, that's part of really feeling strongly about something and passionate and sharing it with and connecting, is that you also always have the ability to pivot and change, or, just augment or whatever.
right. I mean, in the work that you've done, I have to believe, like, when have been times that you have felt like the most connected in the community that you work with?
I feel it a lot. I mean, I feel it just like if I share something and perhaps I've said it, like you said, 1,000 times, but somehow it came off a little different and it landed, and then I hear back like that just changed the way I feel at work, or the way I move, or I just started thinking about something differently. So for me, it's I, I'm privileged to get that feedback often. I
Mhm,
have a platform, so it's just a connection where people, will have a class, and then I'll get all kinds of feedback on it. I have trainings where I get feedback, but even social media and connecting with other people via podcast or corporate events I'll do, I can see that something that, that I'm teaching lands. And it's wonderful to get that feedback, to know that it helped somebody, in some way.
but don't and I think that you're like me in this, I ask for feedback, so I am
Mhm.
open to that, and
I
I
am
seek
too.
it
Yes,
out.
like yes, yes.
And
That.
so I think that's also a tip and a big thing is that you need to ask for it, because I think what I've had to learn is that, with my personality, and I'm a very positive, I'm a very bright, I'm a very shiny, sunny type of person, and I've had to tell people who are really close to me to say, like, "I need you to tell me hard things. Like I can take it. I think that sometimes because I'm so positive that sometimes people don't feel like they want to say hard things to me, thinking, well, she's so nice. She's so positive. She won't be able to take this feedback. But I actually I appreciate that feedback and I request it because I want to get better. And because I ask for it, then I also feel like you open up that door for trust to reciprocate it, right? So if I'm asking you for feedback, I'm going to do something with it. And then I'm also assuming like you would also be open to feedback. Right. And I still think you
Absolutely.
have to kind of, you said you're blessed to get it, but I have to believe you're blessed to get it and you receive it because you ask for it and you give it.
Yes, and I've had to learn too. I think getting feedback is something that we have to think of as a different lane than like when we were, growing up or in school and you were just getting criticism per se or some kind of criticism. Feedback is meant to be constructive. It's meant and it might not be like something you're doing is not being received well, but it's not against you as a person.
Right.
I think and so I'm separating those 2 things always with this idea of like, okay, what is gonna benefit my message and my life and how, like, if I come from that versus making it personal, I think that's really important for people to do. This is not even though it might be a reflection of something I'm doing personally, it's really meant to, again, move the dial towards something more positive. And I'm similar to you, like, it's actually really hard for me to give feedback, in a constructive way sometimes. I've gotten better at it because I see like, "Oh, here's a positive," and it's almost like I look for that because I think I'm also a more kind of positive person. I think we kind of, we reflect a lot. We mirror what we internalize and how we live our lives. And
Mhm.
so but it's going to benefit somebody if I can actually say, here's how I think it can be done better, or here's how I can think it will ultimately be, more impactful, and you should try this and try this instead. So I've learned how to give it in the way that I want to receive it as well. I think
Yeah.
is how I'm looking at it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is important. And what I've learned, like with my brand, is, and I'm always like, please give me payback. How can I make this you know, better or again, resonate. And because it's there's a lot of highly scientific information, I have to remember like that isn't going to land for everybody. So it's really
Mhm.
nice when somebody said, "Oh, the way you said this or the way you presented it was very like I got it." And that's where I have to remember, "Oh, okay. Like I don't have to like showcase my knowledge. I'm
Mhm.
showcasing it in a way because I'm able to pare it down into something that is more lay, lay friendly, layperson
Mhm.
friendly." Yeah.
Well, and when we're doing this kind of work, we talk to people who love this same work, and then we kind of also get stuck like in our own little community of like, whether it be academia or whether it be whatever. And then when we come out of that community and we talk to a different community, I always find like sometimes some of the things that I share, and when people say to me like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I never heard of that." I'm like, "Really? You've never heard of this?" Is like this feels like basic for me, but it's
Right.
because they don't talk about this all the time. So it's new,
Right.
right? And so I have to remind myself that like I got to get out of my community of people that like talk about this stuff like all the time. This is all we think about. This is all we think about all the time. And when I take and again, this gets back into like why it's so important for that infinity of growth. It's taking that and applying it in another context with another set of people, hearing that it's like, oh, okay, that's what hits. That's what resonates. So anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like getting out of your own bubble because if you do want that message to be received, you have to see how it's being received outside of your bubble
Mhm.
because we're only living in our own house. So we don't know what it's, what somebody else's kind of house is like. I love behind you, you have this do everything with love, I think is what that says.
Yes, it is. That's my favorite
Yes, I
verse.
love that. So how would you approach that? Like when how do you apply that? What is your version of do everything with love?
Yeah. Um, well, I chose that actually is it's a verse. It's 1 Corinthians 16:14. And a couple years ago, I was very honored to be asked to be a Woman of the Year candidate for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And when I took that on, I I prayed about it a lot, and I this just idea of like do everything in love. Like how can I go into this opportunity and be my best self, but also help others? And so when I think about everything in love. It sounds nice and wonderful. I have often been given feedback and I've been told, I love people really, really well, which is like the greatest compliment. But loving people well also means like loving people who you don't necessarily care for really well and serving them well too, right? So I think um, everything in love is how I show up and the words that I use, the way in which I talk to people, the intention in which I bring. And it's also paying attention to things that I don't like, things that stories or the ways in which people represent themselves that I don't care for. It's loving the person and finding things to connect with them so that I can be respectful and that I'm perhaps have opportunity to grow through that. So, I'm not a person that generally says like I don't have a lot of enemies, but that's also kind of a really shallow way to look at that too, because there are people that speak on television or people that post on social media that share things that I disagree with, and in that sense, you could consider that person to like be your enemy. But um, I do not want to be a person that sits like in a tortoise shell and like pulls a cover over my head and is like la 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 la. I can't see anything bad, nothing I don't like. Um, but I have to look at those types of messages or those types of people and say like, "Okay, I really don't like the way that you show up. I really don't like the words that you're using, but what is it about you? What is it about your message that I can find some common ground? Where can I find some respect? What can I where do we have value? Like we're both maybe the value is just like we're both very passionate about this topic. We see it very differently, but I can respect the passion that you have, which makes me know why I'm passionate in the things that I'm passionate about. And I think it's about serving others. Doing everything in love is about being very, very humble. It's about how I'm showing up in the world and how that's making the world better, not just me better. I think it's a way to center myself so that I can be a service to other people.
I love that. That's really beautiful, and I think that's in itself that practice is like that infinity. It's like you're practicing self-love as well
Hmm.
because if we project a lot of the things that we feel inside and we see that with people and that's what I always like if there's somebody that I don't agree with or I don't like the way that they're conveying it, I go right into compassion as much as possible. Like there's something that's hurting that
Hmm.
would that probably is the kind of fertilizer for the way that they're conducting themselves. So let's just kind of cap this all off with your final ways that you would recommend to people that you work with, or in general, what you found is of how do people give themselves more love? How do they find that connection?
Hmm. Um, I think a daily practice of stillness is very important with that. Especially in our world today that is so noisy and so busy. Um, and so I think to practice more love, you need to have times of quiet where you can reflect and kind of examine your conscious, be intentional about moments of gratitude. What are you grateful for in your life? Where have you had opportunities in that day? I think it's also important to, in that quiet and kind of stillness, um, be open to where have you not been your best self and how can you do that differently the next day? How can you show up differently? Or is there somewhere that you need to maybe make an amend and um, and how you would structure that? So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is cultivating community that brings you joy and also affirms your gifts. And so I believe we know that we're using our spiritual gifts when what we're doing brings us lots and lots of joy, and other people tell you that they are experiencing joy as a result of those gifts, right? So, um, cultivating relationships that allow you to live out your gifts, I also think is important. Um, I think knowing having some intention around a greater purpose, right? So whatever I talk about this often, that whatever's at the center of your life will determine the values and beliefs that you have, and the values and the beliefs that you have determine the actions and the decisions that you make, and the actions and the decisions you make have effect on the influence and the impact that you have in the world. And so being really, really clear on what's at the center of your life. You know, if the center of your life is your faith, then what you value and the decisions you make is different than if the center of your life is wealth and the values and the decisions that you make and the impact that you have. Not, that's not saying that one is better than the other, but being clear on what is at the center of your life right now has it's an insight into how you're showing up and what you're spending your time, what you're spending your energy on. And if you don't like where you're at, if you don't like the time that you're spending, if you don't like the impact that you're having, taking some time to really reflect on what is at the center of my life. Is it the people I'm with? Is it the time I'm spending? Is it the job I have? Is it the place I'm living? All of those types of things impact that. So
And just, piggybacking off of that, how does one know what is the center of their life? Like, what is the question? Is it, like, where you find your that you spend the most time, or you spend the most thought, or you, prioritize the most? Like, how does one
yeah.
know, like, what that is?
What gets your attention?
Mm,
Right? So
mhm.
what are your thoughts about? What are you spending the most time doing? What is the thing that you just can't stop worrying about, thinking about, doing? That is what's gonna be at the center of your life. Um, and the beautiful thing is that we get to change that too. So if you discover that and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you know what? The center of my life right now is stress." Or the center of my, or maybe I think a lot of people I think would say, "Oh, the center of my life is my family," which is beautiful, like wonderful. Make your family the center. But what is it about your family that is the center of your life? Is the center of your life about your family trying to control everything in your family so that they have a very specific experience that you believe? Like that's you need to think about, like, why is that so important to you? Why are you spending all that time? What could maybe be underneath that that you actually need to reveal for yourself? Like that's an area of self-care, self-love that you need to attend to. If you have this desire to control, if you have this desire to be prescriptive and like navigate and helicopter parent your children, right? Or if you have a need and a desire to like try and control your parents because now they're at an age where they can't take care of themselves, like what is going on there? Like, where do you need to attend to your own self? So,
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. Um, and I think, getting back to that when you were talking about the person that comes in like, I'm so busy," that made me chuckle a little bit because I remember about 12 years ago, I thought to myself, "I'm gonna stop saying that out loud,
yeah.
and I'm gonna catch myself." And it isn't to say I don't ever say that, but I try and reframe it like, "Oh, life is really full right now," or something like that, because what I'd love to know what your opinion is. Like, I have my own opinions about why people say that, but what do you think people are truly trying to say when they're like, "Oh, I'm so busy. I've got," you know?
Oh my gosh, I think it's a lot of things. And
Mhm.
I agree. 'Cause for me, the word that I'm trying to stop saying is worry, right? Like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm so worried." Like, I'm not worried. Because again, I'm a woman of faith, right? So if I say
Right.
like I'm worried, then I'm basically saying like I think that I'm smarter than God, right? And like God is smarter than me and he's got a bigger plan and stuff I'm not going to get. But with the busy, I think busy comes from this culture where we have said like busy is valuable and you have to demonstrate that you're always busy. It's like there's no value in just being still.
Mhm.
And busy equates to achievement, busy equates to status, busy equates to productivity, busy equates to execution, busy equates to growth. And I would argue that actually growth isn't happening when you're busy. It's when you're uncomfortable. that you're
Mm.
growing. And I don't know about you, but I am not usually busy. When I'm uncomfortable, I'm not like busy, busy, busy. When I'm uncomfortable, I'm like, ooh, hold up. Let me sit back. Like,
Get still. I know. Yes.
all those
Yeah.
things. It's like I pull back, right, when I'm
Pause. Yep.
uncomfortable. So, yeah.
I
But what
love
do you
that.
think? What do you think when you said you have
I
opinions?
think so too. I think it's that, like you said, it's like a little, it's an award of some kind that,
Mhm.
that somehow, and then it's almost like, it's not like we're purposely or intentionally trying to one up someone, but it's just this like, look at all the things I have going on and this somehow has value when it really doesn't. I think of like just kind of just skitter scattering around without a purpose, and so I
Mhm.
feel like we can be, like you said, on a path and on a trajectory where there's purpose and things, there are full days, but like busy to me is the same. I don't feel like you're in it. I don't think you're connected mind, body, spirit when you're busy. I think it's just this idea that you are achieving something, but you really, like you said, I love it. It's not until you're uncomfortable that you're really growing. Cause I mention that all the time. We never grow without some discomfort, struggle, and we're
Mhm.
feeling, and that's not something to run away from. That's really just that's how we get stronger, and that happens, like you said, when you pull back or a little bit more still, and not that little zipping around feeling like I got to do this. I'm so busy. I've got to pick. I think it's also just we wire ourselves, and like you said, with worry, you're wiring that message. Like worry, it's almost like an onomatopoeia. You say it and you feel it, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, can you just reframe that? And yeah, like you said, have it's again not like just chucking all like whatever happens, happens. I'm not going to think about it. But it's just not living in that space where you don't have the faith that things are going to work.
Yeah.
Um, and by a lot of this is language, like you said, and that's all that growth
Yes.
mindset. It's like the language is important because you're listening to that.
Right. I was gonna say you said language. I was gonna share that. I think Brene Brown wrote her book Atlas of the Mind, and what I love about that book and what really made me pay attention was the language piece and how there are just words that we constantly use, but they don't mean like, they don't mean what we think that they mean, right? And worry. A lot of times, I think when people say like, "Oh, I'm so worried," you're not worried, right? What the issue might be is you're not worried. You are hopeful, right? Or the worry might be you're scared, or the worry is you're trying to control, right? Like you're not worried, you're like upset because of the lack of control that you have, or you're not worried because you're uninformed, right? And so when you change that, it's like, am I worried? No, I'm uninformed on how this might look versus, I'm worried about my kid coming home on time. Right? Like, are you worried that they aren't going to make it home? Like, what's actually underneath that? I think it's I don't know, I love this idea of us really paying attention to these words, these tapes that we keep playing in our heads
Yes.
and asking, "Where did that word come from?" And and is that the actual word, or is there something else? Um, and stress is no, "Oh, I'm so stressed." I don't think you're really stressed. Like, what are you? Is it stress? Are you scared? I don't know. I could talk about that forever, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. I totally agree that the words matter because we're
Mhm.
listening and our body's listening, our nervous system is listening. So, well, Gretchen, thank you so much for your time. Can you just tell us a little bit about how anyone can find out more if they want to dig into the things you're offering, including your podcast, which I've been on?
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. I have a show. It's called Made for Impact. And on my show, I talk with leaders. In fact, I had you on, Lara. I have leaders that come on and share either the impact that they are hoping to make in the world, or they share about the impact that they've had and how that's affected them and their journey. And for me, if you are interested in connecting with me, the best way is through LinkedIn. Um, and you can find me there. And I'd love it if you checked out my show and listened. And if you would drop me a note, I'm always happy to talk about this. I feel like I'm like the biggest learning nerd ever. I could talk these kinds of conversations all the time and just
Yeah,
share new ideas. So,
I love it. I love it. Yes, we'll have all that in the show notes. So, everybody check that out. Thank you so much, Gretchen. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
And for everybody listening, as always, I'm pulling for you.